What you remember about my father before he married my mother?
Well, he was a druggist at Riverview, and he was about the same age as Fred and Crew. And they used to play jokes against each other. And they used to call him Fish, and he'd call them Fish. And I remember one time that Fred and Crew won, grabbed his money box.
His what?
Money box. So he had his money and jumped in the car and took off. And of course he didn't have a way of chasing them. And he didn't know that it was a joke they had planned to play a joke on him. But that was the time he drove I think he drove a Packard. So he loved fancy cars. And I went to Atlanta with him once or twice to a ball game. And he would always want to find somebody on the highway that wanted to race with him.
Fascinating.
But that was back in his lively days. That was before he and Faye married. And I don't know how long they courted, you might say, before they did marry. But I remember they had the wedding at our house, and then they had arranged that room out at the motel out there. And I don't remember how long it was.
At the hotel next to
the store.
The store,
yeah.
Okay.
And I don't know how long they stayed there, but I remember you were born in Riverview. And then they moved to Fairfax, and his dad owned that building there where Doc's office was.
Did he?
Yeah, where the drugstore was. It belonged to the Combs. And up behind that drugstore, there was a wooded area up there. There was a nice little rustic house back there. And when he got that drugstore in Fairfax, they moved up into that house.
How long did he keep the store in Riverview after he married my mother?
I couldn't tell you. I really don't know, but I'd say probably a year or two maybe, but I have no proof of that. And I know when they decided to move to Fairfax, I remember this, Papa had a connection with a wholesale furniture outfit. I think it was in Atlanta. And he and Faye went over to the factory and selected furniture that they wanted for their house there in Fairfax. So somebody had some money. I don't know whether it was him or his dad or who. But Combs, his dad was a rather wealthy man over that time. He owned an awful lot of land, farms around.
Yes, when he died, I was told he had 4,000 acres.
Yeah, I know he had a good bit because Sterling, who was his half-brother, and I were good friends.
That's my father's half-brother.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah. And Sterling was a nice kid. He was a ladies' man.
Was he?
Sterling was. And he had a chores at home of milking cows and things of that type. And I remember your dad told me one time that Sterling couldn't go down to milk the cows unless he wore a tie because the cows wouldn't recognize it. But
That's funny.
he dressed like that. And your dad's family house had gas lights in it. All the house I had ever been in didn't have lamps and candles. Had some kind of gas mixture or something in those fixtures on the wall. Something very fancy back in that day. I knew at the time what it was called, but I don't now. But they were nice people. His brother used to live in Anderson.
Used to do what?
Your dad's brother lived in Anderson.
Jimmy?
Yeah, and he had a auto body repair shop there. And I used to go by to see him occasionally. And once or twice that your dad and Faye came over, they would go to LaGrange, to Anderson to visit them. In fact, they came by the house one time, all four of them. But that was several years ago. But his brother James had a nice, respectable parts business there in Anderson. And yes, I remember James always had money. And your dad was broke most of the time because he loved to spend.
Yes, he always did.
And when you come out of Fairfax, like you were going to Doc's old house,
Yes.
there was a tract of land on your right that went down the Ocean Nipper Creek, quite a bit of acreage in it. And that was willed to your daddy and James equally. And your dad sold it,
To
his
Jimmy.
half of it, to Jimmy
Yeah, I knew that.
to get some money.
I thought Uncle Doc's house was on land that had been willed to the two brothers.
No, that was land that he had. Well, Doc had bought the land. I don't know who he bought it from, but I hear about 20 acres in there. It went all the way back to the creek, but it might have belonged to.
That's what I was told. But
Well, it might have. I don't know. I just know that he bought it, and he bought it because of all the wooded area behind it, because he liked that sort of situation. But I can't. I can't remember much prior to that. I know he had your dad had of course you lived in Pepperell for a while, but you were
Yes,
just a youngster.
when I was probably 5 or 6.
Yeah, because he came down there and worked for Pepperell. It was just Pepperell at that time. And he wasn't, I think he was just in charge of one department like that, like the weaving room or something.
Like what?
Well, the weaving room,
Weaving room,
or
maybe.
something of that type.
I don't remember. I do remember driving into Opelika with my mother
Yeah.
because she was already having back problems. We went to a chiropractor there once.
Well, I was in school at Auburn at the time. And
Yes, I remember we visited you there once.
I used to come up there, and your mom was always good at making cookies and having sweets. She made some cookies one time out of iced potato cookies. They were awful good.
God, I don't remember that.
And, well, you was a little bitty fella. that time at West Point, the Pepperell, superintendent lived across the highway at a big house. They had a tennis court, a lighted tennis court. And they used to let us come up there from Auburn and go up there and play tennis. Almost right across the highway from where you folks live.
Was it up on a hill?
Yeah.
And was it a big mansion type? I remember that structure. My father felt that their furniture was totally beneath his taste.
Back in those days, the superintendent of most all the mills had a real fancy home. But I don't think they had a swimming pool, but they did have a nice tennis court. And we always enjoyed going up there and playing. And of course, I sometimes would stay at your folks' place there for a while. So.
Do you remember anything about, did my mother ever have any attitude toward my father before she married him?
Have any what? Attitude. No, not that I'm aware of. Best I remember, she thought that he was rather harsh on you and Larry.
Yeah. Well, I thought so too.
But she tried to cover up anything that she thought he might get excited about, because he was rather short-tempered. But of course, a lot of us are. But I just remember that about him, and he didn't have much patience with customers or anybody there in the store. But he was always nice to me. I've never had any complaints against him at all. The only thing I remember was that her trying to cover up for some of you and Larry's accidents or something. But I think I don't know, I guess. So I sort of remember his father was rather, whether the word be ambitious or domineering or what. So I guess he must have inherited of it, somebody from him, but I never did see it in Jimmy times I've been around him.
I know my father studied pharmacy at Georgia Tech, but I wonder how he came to Riverview to work. Who owns the pharmacy? Did he own it himself?
Yeah, he owned it while he was there. I don't know whether your grandfather financed him or not, but he did own it, and then just say later he moved up to a building that your grandfather did own.
In Fairfax?
Yeah.
He pointed that out to me when I was a child.
He had the drugstore
in Riverview.
Yeah, and then he had the drugstore in Fairfax, and off of the back of the drugstore, you could go into Doc's office. And back then, a doctor was allowed to write a prescription on a pad that was furnished him by the drugstore, which was outlawed later.
Was outlawed later?
Yeah. So that way, prescription written by Doc had the pharmacy name up the top. Usually they'd automatically go in there to fill it.
Well, of course, there was no other pharmacy for many miles around. So.
Well, there was one across town.
There was in Fairfax?
Yeah. And next to the drugstore and beyond Doc's office was a barber shop.
I remember that.
And Doc later bought that barber shop. Guy had it, wanted to get out, so Doc bought it and hired someone to run it for him. And there was a grocery store in the same building.
Yes, I remember the row. It was a brick building.
Yeah.
With a metal awning in front.
After school was out, I would walk there to that building, and if Doc wasn't busy, sometimes he would carry me home. Or I'd catch a ride with a salesman. But about half the time I walked home.
And that's 3 miles?
About 3 miles. It probably did me good. I walked down the railroad track. There was very little traffic on the road, so you know anyone to pick you up. That was back when I had some legs. But I don't know, I couldn't do it anymore. But I don't know how long. Doc stayed there for a good while, but he moved all on the other side of town and rented the office from the Trammells. The Trammells used to be a great big landowner around there with your grandfather.
Well, my father's father got his first 1,000 acres from his first wife's father, Elisha Trammell.
Well, the Trammell's house was between Fairfax and Langdale.
Yes, it's still standing and it's in good shape.
They used to have a son. The elevator didn't go all the way to the top. He used to sit out there in the yard in a chair and wave to everybody that came by. Remember him real well.
Where was he sitting? On the lawn? He was sitting on the lawn?
Well, out in front of the house, he'd just sit in a chair. And any traffic came by, anybody walking, he waved at them because he didn't have much sense.
The internet says Elisha Trammell, that is my father's grandfather, had 25 children by 2 wives. I'm astounded by this. I saw the family Bible at his house, and there were only, I think, 7 or 8 children listed.
Well, there were a number of the Trammells I know around, but I didn't know any of them, really. I knew them by name or by reference, but I didn't know them personally.
Well, I thank you.
Well, I haven't said anything much, but I do remember your enthusiasm about watching a train go by.
Oh, that does amuse me. Tell me about that. What house was that?
Well, Grandma and I had disagreement on that. She said it was Cliffside, but it was a mill house, and I think your dad had been laid off, whatever he was, and he went over there just, I don't know that he was even in charge of an apartment or not.
Of what?
I say, I don't know whether he's even in charge of the apartment or not, but he was just working for the mill. And the house they were living in.
He was superintendent at, I think he was superintendent at Cliffside.
Well, wherever this was, he wasn't. He was just living in an ordinary mill house. And it was a typical 4-room house. And I I can remember right by the back door there was a plank off. And you'd hear a train coming, you'd tear out back there and watch your train go by.
Wonderful.
She and I have conflicts about where that was. But, of course, I can't go back and prove any of it.
You said that my family lived in Cedartown, Georgia?
Well, I thought it was. But, I don't know. I thought it was Cedartown, but she said it wasn't. So I can't argue with her because her memory is better than mine.
I don't remember ever hearing anything about Cedartown, Georgia. I was told that they lived in Athens when I was a child, baby. Do you know anything about that?
I remember that. Of course, I remember this, wherever this was, y'all weren't there very long. Because he was sort of a makeshift job with him. And he got on somewhere else, but he moved around so much in those years.
Yes, he did. My mother, well, he's, I guess I heard from him that whenever he got a mill functioning like he wanted it to function, he would take a job offer that came through. Until it was functioning like he wanted it, he would turn down job offers. And apparently he got a lot of offers. I gather he was very good at what he did.
He was, and I think he was a good organizer. But I think he just liked a challenge.
I think that's true. And he liked new environments. And, well, my mother once said that after their daughter died, he was restless. He was very attached to her. And she died at the age of 18 months, I guess, when I was 5 and a half.
I think he was a very devoted husband. He worked in Birmingham for a while.
In Birmingham?
As a pharmacist. I don't know when this was, but he was with Alley Drugstore, which is a local chain.
Alley?
Alley, A-L-L-E-Y.
Alley.
Yeah. It was a local chain. And he was at the drugstore out in the western part of town. How long he was there, I don't know.
That was after they were married?
No, this was before.
Before he worked in Riverview, you think?
Yeah.
Oh, that's it.
I assume it was. I get confused all the time at the thing, but I know he did work for Alley Drugstore. I think Alley still has some places there.
Why not so loud? Thank you.
I can remember where the drugstore is because it was turned out it was real close to where we moved to. But I couldn't swear how long he was there or anything about that.
And you knew him before he set up the pharmacy in Riverview?
No, this was after. No, this. I didn't know him. I didn't know him at the farm. It's just something I'd heard about later on.
You mean in Birmingham?
Yeah.
That you heard about the Birmingham episode?
Yeah, I didn't see him or know when he was there.
No, I see. You met him after he came to Riverview.
I think what I always could understand is how he went from pharmacy to textile.
I've wondered about that too. It seems like such an extraordinary jump.
Yeah. Especially without somebody, you know, pushing you off and your good job. I just don't know how and I was always under the impression that he had a degree in textile engineering or tech.
Well, he sometimes made up things and told people that.
I think he led us, the rest of us, to believe it. And I think my brothers that were friends of his, I think they thought he had a degree.
How amazing. Well, I once heard him tell a friend of his that he owned a lot of cattle in Texas. It's a total fantasy. But the man accepted it.
Well, it pays to dream, I guess.
Oh. Well, he had an extraordinary imagination about himself.
Well, talking about them living in that motel, I know what impressed me.
Hotel.
I mean, the hotel. What impressed me was right after they married, but I went over there, of course, to visit. Beautiful little room. She had a fancy canary cage and one of these big wire things and a big fancy cage, and she had a canary in it. And he'd gone somewhere and bought her right after they married. I know I was quite impressed with it because the beautiful cage, so forth. She was right fond of it. But whatever happened to the canary, I guess he moved to Fairfax too. But, well, there's a lot of this stuff I wish I remembered more about. I've been worried here lately because I didn't know any more about Mama and Papa. I don't know how they ever got together because he was in Striped Nation, she was in Coosa County in Goodwater. I always heard that George Batson and LaFaye had something to do with it. But what he had to do, I don't know. And there's no way they could be courting from Striped Nation to Goodwater except by horse and buggy or occasional train trip.
Well, what's the distance between those two places?
Oh, probably 125 miles.
A lot.
And of course, we had a horse and buggy. You couldn't go that far in one.
Sure.
But this Clyde that was here today, I asked her if any of her relatives ever mentioned this. She said they hadn't. I don't know. There's so much I wish I had asked and didn't. The other thing that confused me a little bit, they were supposed to marry in December. And I was told at one time the chapel was decorated by yucca blossom.
Yucca?
Yeah. Yucca is just now blooming.
Yes.
So it couldn't have been blooming Christmas time. But just things like that keep popping into my mind. I just wonder why I didn't ask.
Do you have any memory of being told where they married?
No. I have no idea. And she didn't know anything about it. Flossie was sort of a historian that died, and I thought maybe she had talked to her some, but she hadn't. So,
well, Clyde did say that she had a lot of papers, so who knows what's in them.
Yeah, Flossie kept an awful lot of records before she died, and I don't know what's in them. You saw that picture yesterday I had of the horse and buggy.
Yes. Well, that was the horse and buggy. You mean that's in the book on Riverview?
Yeah.
That was a mule, wasn't it?
Well, that was here. It was made out here where they lived on Whitesville Road.
Say, wait a minute, I'm confused.
The one I had, the horse and buggy.
It was a horse, not a mule?
I mean, mule. The mules. It was made out here on Whitesville Road. And there was a man drinker that was in the buggy with her.
And that's in Riverview?
But no, it was here
in LaGrange.
True County. It was about down where the old home place was.
Okay, the Hunt home place.
Yeah, right in front of that little old store.
Okay.
That's where it was made. But she didn't have any idea what the date was on it either.
I thought I was told that Manley Marcus worked in the store was here on the outskirts of LaGrange. You think he never did?
He did what?
That he worked in that store.
I don't think so. So I remember his father ran the store.
Yes.
He was a short guy. And I don't know whether he helped finance Papa in his business or my mother's father was in the grocery business in Goodwater. So he probably got finances in both of them to open the store. But
so
just so much.
Clara Maud's family was in groceries also.
Who?
Clara Maud.
Yeah.
Granny.
Yeah, her father had a right nice grocery store, a general merchandise store in Goodwater, there on Main Street, and he did a lot of financing of farmers. Yeah, back then, farmers would come and get their fertilizer and seed, and it was all charged to them, and they paid off when the crop came. And he did an awful lot of that, sort of a banking business, I guess you'd call it. But I think Grandpa there in LaGrange did that too. So that was sort of common back in those days. Because all the farmers were just small-time farmers with dirt poor.
Yeah.
But I just feel so stupid sometimes for not, inquiring. So he carried me down to Stripey Nation a time or two.
He took me down there too.
But I have no idea where I could find it. And this fellow Leak, who was here today, his family came from Stripey Nation.
Really?
Yeah. And there's 2 or 3 references in that Riverview book of people that came from Stripey Nation. So it was apparently a pretty good community at one time. And I think the Goggins family, who really ran the mills in Riverview, I think they originated in Stripey Nation. So,
gee, I never had the impression from Granddad, your father, that there were that many people in Stripey Nation. He did tell me that there were dirt floors in the house.
Yeah. Time I went down there was just one old store and one house, best I remember. But it's apparently a bright, lively community at one time.
Oh, interesting. There was nothing left when I went there.
Well, there's several references in that book of things that people had written. And a lot of references. I was born and raised in Stripey Nation.
Do you remember the story of how the community got the name Stripey Nation?
The only one I remember was about the said ticket.
That's the one I heard.
Yeah, that's the one I ever
Well, what was the story?
I think he told me that. I'm not swearing to that.
I think he told me that too. Tell me the story.
Well, if I told the whole out, there was a general merchandise store there in town at a small community. And the proprietor of the store got in a shipment of cloth. And he had managed to buy some bolts of bed ticking real cheap. And he usually sold stuff based on his cost. So he was selling bed ticking for practically nothing. And it was so cheap, the people came in and bought it, not needing it for the bed, but they took it and made shirts, pants, and things out of it. Because most all the clothes were handmade then.
Yes.
And there were so many people walking around with striped clothes on, that they called it Striped Nation.
Do you think that the people in the striped clothes called it Striped Nation, or other people? What did you hear?
I don't know who originated it, but it was again to refer to it as Striped Nation.
Yeah. Yes, that's what I was told, but I wasn't told who came up with the name.
I think Papa told me that. I'm not sure.
Yeah, he told me that. Or else my mother did. I don't remember which.
Well, your mama was about the nicest woman I've ever known.
Yes, she was a wonderful woman. I feel honored to have
She
been
was
her child.
accommodating and always pleasant. And I guess I thought, shouldn't say it, I guess, but I guess I thought more of her than any of the others, because she was the oldest girl and I was the youngest. I guess she looked after me more than a lot of the others did. And I always felt close to her. So, I was so glad that we got a chance to come to California. See her.
Did you go out to visit her when she was dying?
What?
Did you go out to visit her when you were dying, when she was dying?
Yeah. She died while we were there.
I see. I had left before that. My father insisted I should abandon all my property in the Virgin Islands and get a job in California, and it wasn't possible. It was becoming too stressful for me to stay in his house. It was always too stressful for me to stay in his house.
Yeah, I think Helene was in the room with her when she finally passed away.
Oh, did she?
But we were out there, and I was the one that your dad had me to call back to Riverview and all, and give them all the message that she had died. And then, of course, they shipped the body back, and we were still on our way back home. That was a long trip, it's not far.
Where did she die? Was she in his house?
Yeah, in the house,
At San Quentin?
yeah. In her own bed there in the house.
When I left, she was in the hospital and she hated being there. She told me she wanted to die.
I think she'd been been in a time or two, but I think they'd given up any hope for her. And
oh, yeah.
she, I don't know what, I think she said to Helene, says, I know I'm dying, but I was hoping to hold out long enough for some of the family to come. And of course we got there a day or two before she died. It was a long trip. Had no air conditioning. It was a hot trip.
By automobile?
Yep. We had trouble on the way with water pump going bad. They had a hard time finding water in some of the places. We enjoyed it, but Pam and Marlene were with us, so we just decided one time we were going, and Helene's mother and daddy came down and kept house and looked after things for us while we were gone.
Where were you living at that time?
Birmingham. Yeah, we had a little business going, a little nursing business. They sort of looked after things while we were gone. I had a partner at the time, so things went along all right. But we had to scrounge around to get enough money to make the trip. I still, some way, I have some of the gas tickets when we bought gas going and coming. Gas was cheap back then in comparison. But we never were sorry that we made the trip. We enjoyed it in spite of what happened after we got there. And of course, we weren't all that surprised knowing the condition she was in. She was pretty good about writing letters back home.
Do you still have her letters?
Well, they weren't necessarily to me. They were to Mom and Papa. I don't imagine there's any element of it. But I expect all that stuff was destroyed. I don't know whether, I doubt if Mom and Papa ever kept much of that kind of stuff.
Probably not. Did she write to you?
I don't know whether we have anything from them or not. I don't think so. I'll check through some of the stuff and see if I can find anything.
I would be grateful. I would be grateful.
Yeah.
Well, I guess we'll stop this.
Well,
I'm grateful for your attention.
I don't know how it'll turn out. Just so many things now. Wish I had asked somebody. Maybe your mama would have known.
Yeah.
But just stupid part of youth, I reckon, is just not to try to find out too much.
Tell me again about your being with my mother when she died.
We had driven out to California earlier in that week, knowing that she only had a short time left, and we were the only ones of the family that were able to pick up and go to be with her. We were there, I believe, on either late Thursday or early Friday before she died on Sunday. And we stayed on the premises of San Quentin in their home. And she was so gracious even at that time about our accommodations and whether we were satisfied or convenient. And so I was with her almost constantly there in the home. They had a practical nurse looking after her, but I hoped I was some consolation to her being near her. And I remember that she wanted me to have something of hers, and she had me to look in the closet and get out a house coat. It was a rose-colored flowered house coat that had not even been worn, and she wanted me to have it, and I still have it. And she was in great pain and so uncomfortable, but as I recall, I cooked one of the suppers there while we were there, and then Elisha carried us out for another supper, and she was interested in knowing whether we were taken care of properly, which we were. Then on Sunday, she evidently became a great deal worse, and Elisha called Larry and Norma to come, and they came with their children, who were very small at the time, and they were there in the home until it was decided that she needed to get on to the hospital. I rode in the ambulance with her from San Quentin to the hospital, and Buddie and Elisha and Larry and Norma followed. They took care of her at the hospital, and we were all in the room, except, as I recall, Elisha decided he needed to go back to the house to change clothes or put on a fresh shirt or something. So he was not actually at the hospital when she died, but got there shortly after. We weren't there a great deal of time. I don't recall whether it was maybe an hour or two, but not more than that. And her breathing became labored, and I was sitting right beside her, and Larry and Norma were at the foot of the bed, Buddie was in the background, and she just quit breathing very quietly, softly, no struggling. I rushed across the hall to the nurse's station and asked the nurses to come quickly to see that she was still alive, but she had already quit breathing. And I was so glad that we could be there and be of any comfort to her during her last moments. And we did not get to return to Alabama with her body, but she was taken care of nicely, and we did have, there was a service there before they put her on the plane to take her to Alabama for the burial. So we were there with her at the service, as well as being with her for a few days before she died. And that was always a comfort to me, to know that she had someone there that was very close to her during her last moments, since none of the rest of the family could be there. But we were so glad that we made the trip and could be with her at the time.
Someone told me that she had said she wanted to hang on until someone from the family came. Do you know about that?
No, not necessarily, although most of the family knew that she only had a short time left and had encouraged us to try to make the trip, and which we did with our two daughters. And we drove out, and of course at that time driving conditions weren't nearly as good as they are now, and it took us a few days to get there, and we were so glad we made it before she passed away and could spend a couple so days with her.
Do you know anything about the burial?
Not really. As I recall, the service they had there in San Rafael was very short but nice, and there were people there, of course, people that we didn't know, but I'm sure were some friends of hers. And at that time Muriel, a cousin, was in and out during the last few days, and she had been at the house and visited with us and with Faye during the time that we were there. So she did have family with her, but as I don't recall a great deal about the service, but I do know it was nice, and she was put away very nicely.
Now that was in San Rafael.
Yes, as far as I recall, of course I wasn't familiar with the area exactly, but as I recall, it was the service at a chapel or something there in San Rafael. And then, of course, she was brought by plane back to Alabama for burial at Glass Cemetery.
Right. Do you know anything about the interment at Glass?
No, I don't.
I have no idea who was there or who arranged it. Nothing.
Well, of course, Elisha accompanied the body back on the plane.
Oh, he did.
And I'm sure all the local family, as much as possible, were there, but I don't know the details of the services because we were still in California and did not get back in time, of course, for the service. But she was a wonderful person, very loving, and very sweet, and she did love her two boys so much. She was always so, I guess you could say, protective of them, and she expressed so much love for them.
How did you meet my mother and father?
They moved to Columbia, Tennessee, for Elisha's work at one of the mills, and they moved into a house across the street from where we lived at the time. My grandmother had a cow. We had quite a little pasture area adjacent to the home. And she kept this cow and had fresh milk then. Of course, they didn't have at that time a lot of the conveniences we have now. And so she bottled milk and sold to some of the neighbors. And Faye bought milk from her for the boys. And I was the one to deliver it across the street to her. So, of course, I was in contact with them frequently. And at one point, Ruth, a sister, and Buddie, her brother, baby brother, had come up to visit her and the family. And as I delivered the milk one morning, they were all on the front porch. And they introduced me to Ruth and Buddie. And when she introduced Buddie, she said, "This is my baby brother." And I looked up at this 6-foot-tall fellow, and I was short, of course, and I said, "Well, he doesn't look very much like a baby brother to me." But that was the very beginning of our long courtship and marriage. This fall, we would hope to celebrate our 73rd celebration for our anniversary. So it must have stood very well. And they moved shortly afterwards. I don't recall whether, I guess it must have been that particular visit that they were there, that Faye and Elisha moved to Shelbyville for his transfer to one of the mills there, I assume. And so I even have pictures of Faye, the two boys, Ruth and Buddie, sitting on the running board and fenders of the car with the car packed up and the moving truck in the background when they were leaving Columbia to move to Shelbyville. But of course, Buddie managed over the years of our long-distance courtship, he managed to get back several times that maybe his own close family didn't know he was coming back to see me. Oh. But I did hate for them to be moving because I had enjoyed our association with Faye and the boys, and I babysit for the boys several times and felt very, very close to them.
I sometimes josh Buddie and say, don't forget, I met your wife before you did.
Well, our courtship had to be rather long distance, but he was very faithful about writing every day.
Really?
And sent special deliveries for Sundays. And it almost became a joke between the postman and me about his letters, because oftentimes he would make crazy little drawings on the envelope and little comical sayings. And so I think our postman got quite a thrill of sending those kind of letters to me, but I looked forward to them greatly since he didn't get to come frequently. But he spent a lot of weekends in Columbia that maybe his folks didn't know he was there.
How old were you and he at that time?
Well, at the time I met him, I was not quite 14.
Really?
Oh, I think it was in June that we met, and my birthday is in October, and I would have been 14 in October. So he was 17. He was just entering Auburn at the time. And that went on, of course, for more than 4 years, because he had to stay out one part of 1 year on account of an appendicitis operation at Auburn. So he actually graduated in January of 34. I went down by train to be with him when he graduated. They didn't have a large ceremony like they do now, but anyway, I was there at the time he graduated, and that was in January of 35, and we married in September of 35. His family didn't know we were planning to get married. So he thought it was best to wait until after we married and then let them know, which he did. He wrote them. I think it was maybe a special delivery even for that. He wrote them to let them know that we were married. But he had already shipped his clothes and his trunk and everything to Columbia about a week before we married. And so he was definitely planning to stay in Tennessee when he made that trip.
Well, that's a wonderful story. I wanted to ask you what you remember about my parents and my brother and me in the short time we were together in
Well, I think you and Larry were rather close, even though maybe your temperaments or inclinations were somewhat different. But Larry was a very sweet baby when I first knew him.
What year was this?
It must have been about 29.
So he would have been 3.
Well, no, I guess it was earlier than that then, because I don't believe he could have been over 2
Well, his birthday was November 11, as I remember. So he would have been approaching 2.
Well,
Approaching 3.
I enjoyed both Larry, and at that time we called E.T., who is now Tram, and I do even have pictures of being with them, and they were both sweet boys, and Faye had been very careful with them and loved them and tried to protect them from a lot of harsh things that could have happened and may have happened. And, as they grew up and later moved to California, I still have some pictures of them, Larry and Tram together, so that they were close, even though their temperaments maybe were not exactly the same.
No, I think the temperaments really diverged later, but because the family moved so often, we were each other's, I guess, protection against the world in a way.
But Faye was such a wonderful person and so sweet and demure, and she was just a true Southern lady. And I sometimes felt a little bit sorry for her in some respects, but I think she did have a good life and was able to overcome a lot of things that maybe were not exactly right.
Mm-hmm. Well, she told me once that life with that man, meaning my father, was not easy. He was a difficult person, no question.
He was very, very strict, and he was seemingly somewhat older than she was. I don't know his age, but
he was about 4 years older than she.
And she made a good home for him and enjoyed doing for him. Particularly her boys.
Yes. It was a difficult life for her. She told me that. And I regret some things. He wouldn't let her paint, even though her major in college had been painting. So that was out. And he didn't allow pets after a certain period in their life. Buddie tells me he gave her a canary when they were first married, which surprises me. But later, we were allowed to have lovebirds in the house, I remember, when I was a child. But then they found out about psittacosis, which lovebirds can't carry, so they had to go. But there were other small creatures.
But I know she had a very small little dog that rode with her on a trip driving back just alone with she and the little dog from California to Alabama. And she came and spent a night with us in Birmingham and had the little dog with her. I don't recall his name. I should have, but I don't recall his name, but she was very proud of him.
Yes, she liked toy terriers, and
well, that must have been what he was.
My father put up with toy terriers for quite a long time, and then he even forbid those. It's too bad, because she needed a lot of physical affection, which she didn't get from him, or really from the boys. It wasn't considered seemly somehow. And so the little dog was her physical affection.
Her family.
I remember one of the dogs was named Willie, but I don't remember the names of others.
I think that may have been the one that came across country with her. And I often wondered how she ever made that long trip alone driving with just she and the little dog.
She was a very strong woman. Like many Southern women, they call them steel magnolias. She could do. difficult things.
Yes.
But then, you know, like other Southern women, they don't project that ability. I don't know, it's considered sort of unseemly to look tough and strong. But she was a very resilient person.
She was a very special person. And I always enjoyed our association with her.
Well, I'm grateful for this interview.
Well, I wish I could recall a lot more things to tell you, but of course, at our age, we have so many things rolling around in our heads, we have to forget some of them.
How old are you now?
93. Well, I'll be 94 this fall.
Well, you're still improving. So,
Thank you.
You learn anything?
oh yeah, let's see.